The city lights blurred past the windshield like watercolor streaks as David Morrison gripped the steering wheel, acutely aware of the woman slumped in his passenger seat. Julia Martinez, his assistant of 3 years, always punctual, always professional, always perfectly put together, was currently anything but. "I'm fine," she slurred for the third time, her head lolling against the window. "You didn't have to come get me, Mr. Morrison." "It's David," he said quietly, though she'd never called him that in 3 years. "And yes, I did. Rachel called me worried sick." He'd been halfway through reviewing quarterly reports when his phone rang. Rachel, Julia's best friend and their marketing coordinator, sounded panicked. "Julia's at Murphy's bar and she's not okay. Her blind date ditched her and she's been drinking alone for 2 hours. I'm out of town and she won't answer my calls anymore. Can you—" He'd grabbed his keys before she finished asking. Now, watching Julia fumble with her seatbelt, David wondered if this was a mistake. Not picking her up, that was non-negotiable. But sitting this close to her, in the intimate darkness of his car, catching the scent of her perfume mixed with whiskey, feeling the careful walls he'd built over the past 3 months threatening to crumble. "You know what I hate about you?" Julia's voice cut through his thoughts, startling him. "I'm sorry?" "Your perfectionism." She counted on her fingers, though the numbers seemed to confuse her. "You expect everyone to be as perfect as you. Do you know how exhausting that is? To try to anticipate your every need, to have reports ready before you ask, to make sure your coffee is exactly 175 degrees? He didn't know she knew the temperature he preferred. "And your morning greetings," Julia continued, warming to her topic. "Just, 'Good morning, Miss Martinez,' every single day. So cold, so formal, like I'm just furniture in your office." David's hands tightened on the wheel. He'd kept it formal deliberately, especially after the divorce. "And you never notice," Julia said, her voice dropping to something almost vulnerable. "I changed my hair 3 times this year. 3 times. Different styles, different colors. You never said a word." He had noticed. God, he'd noticed every time. The bob in March that made her look younger, more carefree. The highlights in June that caught the sunlight streaming through his office windows. The long layers last month that she kept tucking behind her ear when she was nervous. He'd noticed everything, memorized every detail, and said nothing because he was her boss, because he was technically still married, because acknowledging how much he noticed would mean acknowledging everything else. "But you know what else I hate?" Julia turned to look at him, and even in her inebriated state, her eyes were intense. "I hate that despite all that, despite everything, you're still the best man I know." David's breath caught. "You remember everyone's birthday. Not just remember, you actually care. When Tom's daughter was sick, you told him to take all the time he needed and sent flowers to the hospital. When Sarah's mom died, you personally drove her to the airport and told her the company would cover her flights home for the next 6 months for visits to her dad." "That's just basic decency," David managed. "No, it's not. It's you." Julia's words were slurring together now, but her conviction was clear. "You pretend to be this cold, efficient CEO, but you keep everyone's coffee orders memorized. You stay late to help interns with presentations. You smile. God, when you actually smile, it's like the sun coming out, but you do it so rarely, like you're rationing joy." They were pulling onto her street now. David had her address memorized from 3 years of sending company cars, delivery confirmations, the occasional late-night document courier. "And I hate," Julia continued, her voice breaking now, tears starting to stream down her face. "I hate that I fell in love with you, knowing I could never have you. 3 years, David, 3 years I've loved you, and you have this perfect wife, this perfect life, and I'm just the assistant who brings you coffee and files your reports and loves you so much it hurts."
David pulled up to her apartment building, his heart hammering so hard he's sure she could hear it. He put the car in park, but couldn't move, couldn't breathe. "I should have quit," Julia whispered, her eyes closing. "Should have left before I... She slumped forward, passed out mid-sentence, her confession hanging in the air between them like smoke. For a long moment, David just sat there, hands still on the wheel, staring at nothing. 3 years. She'd loved him for 3 years. The same 3 years he'd been trapped in a marriage that died quietly, slowly, until he and Victoria were nothing but polite strangers sharing a house. The same 3 years he'd noticed every detail about Julia and told himself it meant nothing. The same 3 years he'd kept his distance, professional, cold, because getting close to her would mean admitting his marriage was over. And now, 3 months after signing divorce papers, he still hadn't told anyone at the office about. Here she was, confessing everything, believing it was impossible. David looked at Julia's sleeping face, peaceful now, tear tracks drying on her cheeks. He reached over gently, brushing a strand of hair from her face, that new style he'd definitely noticed, and whispered to the empty car, "I'm divorced, Julia. Have been for 3 months." But she was already asleep, and the words dissolved into silence.
Getting Julia into her apartment was an exercise in awkward logistics. David found her keys in her purse, trying very hard not to look at anything else, and managed to unlock her door while supporting most of her weight. She mumbled incoherently against his shoulder, something that sounded like spreadsheets and your stupid perfect face. Her apartment was exactly what he'd imagined, though he'd never let himself imagine it before. Small but cozy, decorated in warm earth tones with plants on every available surface. Books stacked on the coffee table, a laptop open on the kitchen counter, a half-finished mug of tea beside it. It was lived in, comfortable, unmistakably Julia. David carried her to what he assumed was the bedroom, nudging the door open with his foot. He laid her gently on the bed, careful to support her head. She curled immediately into the pillow, looking younger in sleep, vulnerable. He removed her shoes, sensible heels she wore to work, and pulled a blanket over her fully clothed form. For a moment he stood there, looking down at her, his mind replaying every word she'd said. 3 years I've loved you. David retreated to the living room, closing her bedroom door part way. He should leave, go home to his empty penthouse, his silent rooms, his perfectly organized life that felt hollow. He should maintain proper boundaries, professional distance. Instead, he sank onto her sofa, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. The divorce had been finalized 3 months ago, but the marriage had been over much longer. He and Victoria had been college sweethearts, married at 25 because it seemed like the next logical step. Their families approved, their social circles overlapped, they looked good together in photographs. But somewhere between building his company and Victoria's law career, they'd stopped being partners and started being roommates. Polite, distant roommates who scheduled sex like business meetings and communicated through calendar invites. The divorce had been civil, almost friendly. Victoria had actually laughed when they signed the papers. "We should have done this 2 years ago," she'd said. He agreed. But he hadn't told anyone at the office. It seemed unprofessional somehow, personal information that didn't belong in the workplace. And if he was honest with himself, brutally, painfully honest, he hadn't told anyone because he wasn't ready to examine why the first thing he felt after signing those papers was hope. Hope and an immediate awareness of Julia Martinez that he'd been suppressing for longer than he wanted to admit. David leaned back on the sofa, exhaustion washing over him. Through the partially open bedroom door, he could hear Julia's soft breathing. His eyes drifted closed, just for a moment, just until he was sure she was okay. Sleep claimed him before he could reconsider.
Julia awoke at 3 a.m. with her mouth tasting like regret and her head pounding like a construction site. For a disoriented moment, she didn't know where she was. Then recognition filtered through. Her bedroom, her apartment, her bed. But something was wrong. She was fully clothed except for her shoes. Fragmented memories crashed through her consciousness like a highlight reel from hell. The bar, too many cocktails, Rachel calling someone, a car ride, talking. Oh God, what had she said? Julia sat up too quickly, immediately regretted it, and pressed her palms against her temples. She needed water, a shower, a time machine to go back and stop herself from going on that disaster of a blind date that had led to disaster drinking. She stumbled to her bathroom, turned on the shower as hot as she could stand it, and tried to piece together the evening. The blind date, some friend of a friend named Trevor, had taken one look at her, said, "You look different from your photos," checked his phone 3 times during appetizers, and excused himself to the bathroom, only to text her from outside that something came up. She'd been humiliated, angry, hurt, and instead of calling a car and going home like a rational person, she'd stayed at the bar, ordered another drink, then another, determined to prove to herself that she was fine. She didn't need Trevor or anyone else. Then Rachel had called, and Julia made the mistake of answering, and Rachel had insisted on sending someone to get her, and Julia froze, water cascading over her as a memory surfaced with crystal clarity. David Morrison's voice. It's David. His car, his cologne, his presence beside her in the dark. Her voice saying, "Oh no, oh no, no." The things she'd said flooded back in horrifying detail. The complaints about his perfectionism, the observation about his smiles, the confession about changing her hair, and then, like a knife to the chest, the final damning words, 3 years I've loved you. Julia actually made a sound, somewhere between a whimper and a groan. She'd confessed. She'd actually confessed her feelings to her boss, to David Morrison, CEO of Morrison Technologies, a man so far out of her league he might as well be on another planet, a married man. She'd told her married boss that she was in love with him. Julia finished her shower in a daze of mortification, dried off, and wrapped herself in a towel, her mind spiraling through worst-case scenarios. Would he fire her? Would he be kind about it, which would somehow be worse? Would Monday morning bring an HR meeting about maintaining professional boundaries? She opened the bathroom door, steam billowing out behind her, and padded toward her bedroom to find clothes and perhaps a plan to move to another country. That's when she saw him, a man, sitting on her sofa, head tilted back, asleep. Julia's scream died in her throat as recognition hit. David Morrison, still in his work clothes, expensive slacks and a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up, asleep on her couch, looking somehow both uncomfortable and peaceful at once. He'd stayed, all night, on her couch, which meant he'd carried her inside, put her to bed, taken off her shoes, and instead of leaving like any normal person would, he'd stayed. Why had he stayed? Julia stood frozen in her towel, dripping onto her hardwood floor, staring at her sleeping boss, while her brain tried to process this development, and failed spectacularly. Then David stirred, shifted position, and his eyes opened. For one endless, horrifying moment, they stared at each other. Julia in a towel with wet hair plastered to her head. David, rumpled and disoriented, clearly just waking up on her couch. "I can explain," they said simultaneously. David sat up quickly, running a hand through his disheveled hair. Julia had never seen his hair disheveled, had never seen him as anything other than perfectly put together, and it was doing things to her heart rate that were deeply inconvenient given the circumstances.
"I should go," David said, standing. "I just wanted to make sure you were okay. You were
You fell asleep in the car, and I brought you in, and I was going to leave, but I thought I should wait to make sure you didn't need anything, and I must have dozed off." He was nervous. David Morrison, who commanded boardrooms and negotiated million-dollar deals with perfect composure, was nervous and rambling. "I don't remember much," Julia lied, clutching her towel like armor. "From last night. The bar is fuzzy. Did I say anything embarrassing?" She watched his face carefully, looking for any sign that he remembered her confession. David's expression flickered with something. Surprise? Disappointment? Before smoothing into careful neutrality. "You were upset about your date," he said slowly. "You talked about work. Nothing that you need to worry about." He was lying. She could tell he was lying, which meant he did remember, and he was being kind about it, which was somehow worse than anything else. "I should let you get dressed," David continued, moving toward the door. "Take today off. Actually, take the whole weekend. Come back Monday if you feel ready." "Mr. Morrison—" "David," he interrupted quietly. "Please, after last night, I think we can skip the formality." After last night, when she'd told him she loved him, when she'd poured out 3 years of secret feelings, and now he was being kind and gentle and giving her an out, probably preparing some professional distance speech for Monday. "David," Julia said, the name feeling strange on her tongue. "I'm sorry. Whatever I said—" "Don't be sorry." His voice was firm now, and he looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Don't ever be sorry for being honest, but we should talk about this when you're not recovering from a difficult night, when you've had time to think." He reached the door, paused with his hand on the handle. "For what it's worth, Julia," he said, without turning around, "I noticed, every time. The hair in March, the highlights in June, the layers last month. I noticed all of it." Then he was gone, the door clicking softly shut behind him, leaving Julia standing in her living room in a towel, her mind reeling. He'd noticed everything, and the way he'd said it, the tone of his voice. Julia sank onto the sofa, still warm from where he'd been sleeping, and tried to understand what had just happened. Saturday morning arrived with the subtlety of a freight train, in the form of Julia's neighbor, Mrs. Kim, hammering on her door at 8 a.m. "Julia, open up! I saw him leave." Julia, who had managed maybe 3 hours of sleep total, wrapped herself in a robe and answered the door to find Mrs. Kim, 60-something, Korean, unofficial manager of building gossip and everyone's surrogate grandmother, standing there with her phone already out. "Who?" Julia asked, though she knew. Of course she knew. "The man, the incredibly handsome man in the expensive car who carried you in last night and just left this morning looking all rumpled." Mrs. Kim's eyes were sparkling with glee. "Julia Martinez, you dark horse. Who is he? How long have you been seeing him? Why didn't you tell me?" "Mrs. Kim, it's not— I took a picture." Mrs. Kim showed her phone screen, where a slightly blurry but definitely recognizable photo of David Morrison showed him walking to his car, running his hand through that disheveled hair. "Very handsome, good shoulders, nice car, expensive watch. Is he a boyfriend, a lover, a secret husband?" "He's my boss," she hissed, pulling Mrs. Kim inside before the entire floor could hear. "Your boss?" Mrs. Kim's eyebrows shot up. "The CEO? The one you're always sighing about when we have tea?" "I don't sigh about—" "Okay, maybe sometimes I mention— It doesn't matter. Nothing happened. I had too much to drink. He gave me a ride home. He fell asleep on the couch making sure I was okay. That's all." Mrs. Kim looked supremely unconvinced. "Julia, sweetie, I've been married for 35 years. I know what a man looks like when he cares for a woman. That man," she pointed at the photo, "that man was not just making sure you were okay. That man spent the night on your uncomfortable sofa when he clearly has money for the nicest bed in the city. That man cares." "He's married, Mrs. Kim." Mrs. Kim's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. The way he looked at this building when he left didn't look like a married man. Looked like a man with something on his mind. Something like you. You're imagining things. Am I? Then why are you blushing? Why did you just touch your hair the way you do when you're thinking about him? Why? Mrs. Kim, please, I can't hope for something that's impossible. Mrs. Kim's expression softened. She reached out, patted Julia's cheek. Sometimes the impossible things are the ones most worth hoping for. But okay, I'll stop, for now. But Julia, when that handsome man comes back, and he will come back, you call me. I want details. After Julia finally got Mrs. Kim to leave, with promises to tell all when there was something to tell, she found 17 messages in the building group chat, all speculating about her mystery man. She groaned, threw her phone on the couch, and seriously considered the benefits of moving to a different city, or country, maybe Antarctica. Her phone rang. Rachel. "Tell me everything," Rachel demanded the second Julia answered. "You didn't respond to any of my texts after I told you David was coming to get you. I've been worried sick. What happened after he picked you up?" Julia filled her in, editing slightly because some things were too mortifying to say out loud even to her best friend, but Rachel had known her too long to be fooled. "You told him," Rachel breathed. "Oh my God, Julia, you actually told him you loved him." "I was drunk." "Drunk words are sober thoughts, Jules. This is what you've been feeling for 3 years. And he stayed on your couch all night, then told you he noticed every time you changed your hair. Do you not see what's happening here?" "What's happening is my boss feels sorry for my pathetic drunk assistant and was being kind because he's a good person." Julia Maria Martinez, you're brilliant at analyzing data and terrible at reading people. David Morrison doesn't do pity. He doesn't do polite all-night sofa vigils for just anyone. And he definitely doesn't memorize his assistant's hairstyles unless he's paying very, very close attention. He's married, Rachel. Have you actually seen him with his wife recently? Have you met her, seen photos of her in his office, heard him mention her? Julia paused, thinking back. Now that Rachel mentioned it, yeah. No. There used to be a photo on his desk, but it's been gone for months. Maybe 5 or 6 months? Interesting. That doesn't mean anything. Maybe he just moved it. Or maybe, Rachel said slowly, there's something you don't know, something he couldn't tell you because it's personal, and he keeps work and personal life very separate. But Julia, that man stayed on your couch all night. That means something. Promise me you'll talk to him on Monday. Really talk to him. Julia promised, hung up, and spent the rest of Saturday oscillating between hope and mortification. By Sunday afternoon, she drafted and deleted 23 different texts to David, ranging from professional to desperate to pathetic. Can we just pretend Friday never happened? She sent none of them. Instead, she stress-cleaned her entire apartment, went through her closet 3 times trying to decide what to wear Monday, and lay awake Sunday night staring at her ceiling, wondering if she'd have a job come morning. Monday morning, Julia arrived at the office an hour early, determined to be the absolute picture of professionalism. She'd chosen her most conservative suit, navy blue, perfectly tailored, completely businesslike. She'd pulled her hair back into a sleek bun that said, "I am a serious professional who definitely did not drunkenly confess her love to her boss 3 nights ago." She'd practiced her "it was nothing, let's move forward professionally" face in the mirror for 20 minutes. David was already there, of course. He was always there first. His office light was on, visible from her desk just outside his door. Julia set down her bag, took 3 deep breaths, and checked her reflection in her compact one more time. Professional, composed, completely fine. She knocked on his office door at exactly 8:59 a.m., her usual time for their morning briefing. "Come in." He looked tired, she noticed immediately, like maybe he hadn't slept either.
Still perfectly put together, David Morrison didn't do rumpled at the office, but there were shadows under his eyes that his usual polish couldn't quite hide. "Good morning, Mr. Morrison." Professional, distant, perfect. "Julia." He stood, which was unusual. He never stood during morning briefings, and he came around his desk, which was even more unusual. "How are you feeling?" "Fine, thank you. I wanted to apologize for Friday night. My behavior was unprofessional and—" "Don't." She stopped mid-sentence, blinking at him in confusion. David stepped closer, though he maintained respectful distance. "Don't apologize for being human. Don't apologize for having a bad night. And please, for the love of God, don't apologize for being honest." "I told you—" Julia's voice cracked slightly. "I told you things I shouldn't have, things that could make this workplace uncomfortable for both of us. You told me how you felt, and I told you I noticed your hair, which probably made you uncomfortable, so we're even." His lips quirked slightly, almost a smile. "It's not the same. Julia, I need to tell you something." David ran his hair through his hair, a nervous gesture he'd never seen from him before. It made him look younger, more vulnerable. "Something I should have told the office months ago, but didn't because it seemed too personal, and maybe because I wasn't ready to deal with what it meant."
Julia's heart was hammering now, so hard she could hear it in her ears. "I'm divorced," David said quietly, clearly. "The papers were finalized 3 months ago. Victoria and I had been separated for over a year before that. It was amicable, mutual, and absolutely the right decision for both of us. We should have ended things long before we did." The world tilted sideways. Julia gripped the back of the chair in front of her for support. "You're divorced? I should have told you, told everyone sooner, but I kept it private. It felt strange to announce it, like I was asking for sympathy or attention, and then time passed, and it felt even stranger to bring it up. And if I'm being completely honest with myself," he paused, meeting her eyes directly, "part of me wasn't ready to examine why the first thing I felt after signing those papers was possibility." Julia couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only stare at him while her entire understanding of the situation rearranged itself. "I'm telling you now," David continued, his voice soft but steady, "because you deserve to know, because what you said Friday night, if you meant any of it, if it wasn't just the alcohol talking, you deserve to know that the situation isn't what you thought it was." "I meant it," Julia whispered, the words escaping before she could stop them. "All of it, even the parts about hating your perfectionism and your cold morning greetings and how you never noticed my hair, except you did notice, and I didn't know you noticed, and—" She was rambling now, words tumbling over each other. "I meant all of it, David, every word." David's expression transformed. The careful neutrality melted away, replaced by something warm and real, and so intense it made Julia's knees weak. "You meant 3 years?" he asked quietly. "Especially that part. Then I need you to know something else." He moved closer now, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. "I noticed every time you changed your hair because I couldn't stop looking at you. I kept my morning greetings cold and formal because I was terrified of what it would mean if I let myself be warm. I stayed on your couch Friday night because the thought of leaving you alone felt impossible, even though every professional instinct I have told me I should go." "David, I'm not your boss right now, Julia. Right now, I'm just a man who's been trying very hard not to fall for his assistant and failing spectacularly at it. A man who sat in divorce mediation sessions and realized the main thing he felt was relief. A man who's been divorced for 3 months and spent every one of those months noticing things about you he shouldn't notice. The way you bite your lip when you're concentrating. The way you laugh at Tom's terrible jokes because you don't want him to feel bad. The way you bring me coffee exactly how I like it, even though I never asked you to memorize it." Julia's eyes were stinging with tears she was trying very hard not to let fall. "So if you meant what you said Friday night, then I need to tell you, I'm falling for you too. I think I have been for longer than I want to admit.
I just didn't let myself acknowledge it until I heard you say those words. This is crazy, Julia whispered. You're still my boss. There are HR policies and power dynamics and... I know. We'll figure all that out. We'll do everything properly, by the book. But Julia, his voice dropped lower. Before we worry about policies and procedures, I need to know, if things were different, if I wasn't your boss, would you want this? Would you want to see where this could go? Yes, she said immediately. Yes, 1,000 times yes. David smiled then, really smiled, the rare one that transformed his entire face, and Julia finally understood what she'd meant about the sun coming out. Then let's figure out how to make it work, together. Their morning briefing was the most unfocused in 3 years, both of them hyper-aware of each other, the air crackling with new possibility and unspoken promise. They agreed to keep things completely professional at the office while they figured out the logistics. They agreed to have dinner that night, away from work, to really talk. They agreed that this was complicated and messy and potentially problematic and absolutely worth pursuing anyway. When Julia finally left his office at 9:30, their usual 15-minute briefing having stretched to 35 minutes, she found Tom, their senior developer, grinning at her from his desk. Boss looks happy today, like really happy. First time I've seen him actually smile in maybe 6 months. Whatever you put in his coffee this morning, keep doing it. Julia managed a professional nod while internally combusting, her face heating. Just doing my job, Tom. Sure, just a job. That's why you've been standing outside his office for 35 minutes with that look on your face. What look? The look people get when something good just happened. But hey, none of my business. He turned back to his computer, still grinning. Julia escaped to her desk, her heart racing. Was it that obvious? Were they that transparent? Her phone buzzed with a text. David, that was terrifying and wonderful, and I couldn't stop smiling after you left. I think Tom noticed. Julia, Tom definitely noticed. He made comments. David, should we be worried? Julia, probably, but I can't bring myself to care right now. David, me neither. Dinner tonight? 7 p.m.? I know a quiet place. Julia, it's a date. David, it's definitely a date.
Julia stared at her phone, a smile breaking across her face that she couldn't suppress. After 3 years of silent longing, after one mortifying drunken confession, after the world's most awkward towel encounter, it was actually happening. She had a date with David Morrison. And somewhere in her building, Mrs. Kim was probably already planning the wedding.
If you enjoyed this story, if it made your heart race, or your breath catch, or your mind wander just a little, then don't forget to like this video. And hit subscribe so you never miss the next twist, the next heartbreak, the next moment that stays with you. More stories, more mystery, more emotion, coming soon.